Okay, I'm back again. Let's see, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to come on over here to this second stream here. Nobody's on here yet. The first attempt didn't work out so well. Okay, I see you guys are starting to come on now. That's good. Can you hear me? To the people that are out there, do I have sound now? Okay, well, I'm going to start talking so we don't have to waste all of our time here. This is week 2, and week 2 is themes in science. So normally in a biology class, they talk about all these different types of topics like evolution, little ecology, little hierarchy of life, little emergent properties, and the characteristics of life. And I love this chapter a lot. And the reason why is because I get to talk about how you have this hierarchy of life that it has increasing complexity as you go up from the basic building blocks to forming, atoms and molecules and eventually getting to living systems. And with each level of complexity, what's really cool is that you have these emergent properties, and life is a result of emergent properties. So that's something that I think is really interesting. That a living system is truly greater than the sum of its parts, and that's kind of cool. You're greater than the sum of your parts. Other themes in biology include all life must interact with this environment, and we call that entire field of study ecology, which is really important because when we have ecology, we study the interactions of living organisms amongst themselves and with their environment. And we also have another theme in biology that's really crucially important, and that is evolution by natural selection. And evolution by natural selection is the central paradigm to our entire field. And evolution by natural selection, evolution is both, as you learned, a fact and a theory. It's a fact because we can observe species changing over time. And evolutionary theory is a explanation, natural selection, to explain why species change over time. And there's a huge implication to evolution by natural selection. And that implication is that all life shares common ancestry. We descended from common ancestry. Humans shared a common ancestor with chimpanzees 5 million years ago. That ancestor was neither human nor a chimpanzee. It was neither. It was its own thing, but that lineage led to us. And so therefore, we're like 99% the same as a chimpanzee. The only difference between us and them is basically timing of our genes. We all make the same proteins. It's kind of cool. You got a house, you got a dog or a cat, you share a lot of stuff in common with your dog and cat because we shared an ancestor going back probably over 100 million years ago. And if you think about it, like you go, I don't have much in common with a dog, but you do. You're warm-blooded. We call that endothermy. You generate your own heat through metabolism. We have live birth. We have hair. We, at least the females, produce milk for their babies. So we have extended parental care. And so all of these traits are shared because we inherited them from a common ancestry. You can go back to 550, 600 million years ago and realize that all animals, even a fruit fly and a worm, we share common ancestry with them. And as a result, we have lots in common. And there's a huge implication to the central paradigm of shared ancestry by evolution. And that shared ancestry is we share these traits in common. And now we can study an earthworm, or actually a nematode, which is a type of tiny little roundworm called C. elegans. And we can study these roundworms to understand how you go from a zygote into an adult, because the processes that take a single-celled worm and make it into an adult are really similar in humans. So we can study mice, we can study fish, we can study small worms and flies, and even baker's yeast to understand a lot about us because of that shared common ancestry. So that's why evolution is so incredibly important to the field of biology. Okay, so now that we're live, if anybody has any questions, feel free to hit me up in the live chat. Like I said, I'll answer any of your questions. It doesn't even have to be related to specifically what's in the class. It's sometimes fun to kind of answer questions of stuff that is not necessarily related or semi-related to what's going on in class. Okay, Well, I got a couple more things I'm going to say, and if nobody asks a question, I'm going to sign off early. But um, one of the most interesting things about the themes in biology, in addition to evolution, there's two other things that we need to make sure we understand. One is life interacts with this environment, and in fact, there's an entire field of study called ecology. And ecologists, what they do is they study how life interacts with this environment, how different species interact, how they interact with the climate, and how you have nutrients and energy flows through ecosystems. And ecology is incredibly important, right? Because um, every living thing interacts with this environment. We have to get energy from our environment. We have to get nutrients from our environment, the building blocks for our own body. And no species, no living thing can be an island by itself. It has to, like I said, get nutrients and energy from its environment. And how they do that sets up all these complicated interactions that we study in ecology. And ecology, we study things like, how is life going to respond to climate change? Or do you guys like to eat fruits and vegetables, bananas, strawberries, watermelons, squash, cucumbers? Every one of our fruits and vegetables that we like to eat, well, they were pollinated by an insect. So these are positive interactions between flowers and their pollinators. And people study how these interactions work. And then, of course, when we study them and we understand their populations, we realize that our pollinators are in trouble. So go plant wildflowers. It really does help. Okay, so we know that ecology is very important. So let me answer this question here really quick, and I'm going to come back to the hierarchy of life and emergent properties because that's really cool stuff. Okay, afternoon. I was wondering if you have any study tips and note-taking tips for these chapters, kind of struggling with all this information from these chapters. Is CAPS a good resource for this class? Yeah, CAPS is good, and one of them also has an SI leader as well, or an OLA, and you can actually see that in Blackboard. But here's my study tips. I even created an entire podcast on some study tips, right? And the study tips are the most important thing to do is you got to study a little bit every day. This is a science class. There's just a lot of information to know before we can really start understanding anything about science. So there is a lot of information, but the way you tackle a lot of information or complex information is to do a little bit every day. So let's say you've got a chapter or a section on chapter 2, and it talks about life's hierarchy. Study that today. Study life's hierarchy today. Make sure you understand it. I've posted practice questions. So write down those practice questions. Pick out all the words that you don't understand. And when you don't understand them, go define them. Define them using the book. Use the Wikipedia. I promise you, Wikipedia is good. It's really good. I'm so tired of teachers bad-mouthing the Wikipedia. It's one of the greatest resources we have. And the next teacher that bad-mouths it, ask them to please go fix it. If there's a problem with the Wikipedia page, tell them to quit complaining and go fix it. I do. So that's a good way to do that, is to study a little bit every day. Make sure you understand one thing. Figure out other words you don't know. Read a section on like life's hierarchy. What did you get out of that? What were the most important points? Do you understand it? Ask yourself, and then work through those practice problems. That's what I can tell you to do, and move from just don't read over your notes. Don't just, well, you're not in class, but don't just read over the chapter and think you know it. You gotta switch from from passive learning to active learning. That's important. And the active learning is working practice problems, looking up the words you don't understand, figuring out the most important parts of each section, and then moving on. And like I said, if you do this every day, it'll help you. And in fact, if in sports, every athlete in sports practices several times a week, multiple times a week. Studying is just like practicing for sports. If you're going to be on a swim team, a baseball team, a softball team, it doesn't matter. You practice all the time. Studying's the same way. You got to spend time studying and do it actively. So there you go. Okay. So like I said, thanks for the question. And if anybody else has another question, feel free to shoot. What I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes is one of the other themes in biology. And I've actually almost got my podcast done. I just have to do a little bit of editing. And you're welcome, by the way. Thanks for the question. That was a good one. So let's talk really quickly about life's hierarchy, emergent properties, and life. So I've got a podcast coming out on this, but basically life's hierarchy is there is at a most fundamental level, we're made up of these just tiny little things called protons, neutrons, and electrons. And they have been around for 13.78 billion years. They were created in an instant at the beginning of the universe. I mean, how awesome is that? These little protons, neutrons, and electrons, protons are their positive charge, electrons are the negative charge, neutrons are the neutral charge. They form atoms, and atoms like hydrogen have been floating through space for billions of years. They've been inside stars, they've been inside rocks, and now you have these things residing in you. It's kind of cool. And so these life's hierarchy is we start out with these basic subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons. They come together to form 92 elements, and each element is different. So that's an emergent property, right? So you take 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, you get carbon, think diamond or charcoal. You take 8 protons, 8, on average 8 neutrons, 8 electrons, you have oxygen, a gas. Pretty cool, huh? So oxygen and carbon have different properties. Those are emergent properties. Well, elements combine to form molecules. I have no idea how many molecules are in the world, but water is a very simple molecule. I'm drinking my I don't have a Diet Pepsi today. I got Diet Mountain Dew. Had to change it up a little bit, get some yellow number 5 and brominated vegetable oil, whatever that is in here. This is made up of lots of molecules, including sucralose. Oh gosh, I don't even know. Let's see what we got. Disodium EDTA to protect flavor. Contains phenylalanine. Oh, so it does have aspartame. I don't fear aspartame one bit. But aspartame is a chemical made up of 2 amino acids, building blocks. Okay, so these subatomic particles make elements. Elements come together to form molecules. Molecules come together to form cells. And that is really important because cells are the basic unit of life. Cells are the smallest unit where all these properties of life emerge. And in my podcast, I'm going to put out the thing that I want you guys to get out of that is that don't ask what is life, ask what does life do. That life is an action. Life does something. And what life does is basically use energy, extract energy from this environment and create order. But the thing about the life's hierarchy and emergent properties is that life is an emergent property of a complex system. And that system is a cell, and it's very complex. So a system is all these machinations, all these things that are happening inside of a cell, breaking molecules down, building molecules up, having energy constantly flow through it. Life is basically the result of emergent properties from a complex system. So cells are the level at which life emerges. And that is really cool. So we're an emergent property. We are greater than the sum of your parts. I could study protons, neutrons, and electrons all day long. And water. I mean, we're 70% water. That doesn't mean I can know anything about you. It's amazing. And then in a life's hierarchy, cells go on to form multicellular life like you and me. And then all individuals in form a population. Individuals of the same species form a population. And that's important because people in population study what makes a population grow and what makes it shrink. And those things are very important. More of that in my podcast. And then populations of different species form biological communities. And then biological communities interact with their non-living components of the environment, like the water, the nutrients, the energy flow. And that forms an ecosystem. And then ecosystems of similar types form biomes, and then the biomes form the biosphere. And at each level, there is increasing complexity, and these new properties, these new properties begin to emerge with each level of complexity. And like I said, I'm about to have my podcast out there for that. Okay, so those are the themes in science this week. We're talking about evolution, life's hierarchy, life interacts with the environment, and emergent properties, and what is a life, or specifically, what does life do? Okay, does anybody else have any questions? I've covered about everything I was going to cover. All right, well, if I don't have any other questions, hey guys, thanks for joining in. And I'll go live again next Thursday, and look for that podcast. It'll be out later today. All right, take it easy.